What's shakin', my swanky skellingtons? Sugar Pants here to brighten your day with another dismal diversion from the daily drudgery. 1980's Without Warning. A craptastic creature feature about an alien that hunts people with flying suckerfish thingies. Unfortunately, our heroes face more danger from the unhinged tinfoil hat-wearing Martin Landau than any extraterrestrial threat. So let's throw out that sleaze docket and find out what this feature is a-offerin'. We have 6 dead bodies, 3 cups blood, 5 cups slime, 10 cups alien fluid, 0 naked breasts. Motherfucking Jack Palance! Palance? Palance? Star Wars merchandise. Come on, let's check it out, cliche. Car won't start when trouble begins, cliche. Lame cat jump scare, cliche. Hand on the shoulder jump scare, cliche. Gunshot to the gut and toothy tentacled frisbee parasites. We begin things at the natural place. The warning. Wait, the movie is called Without Warning and the first thing is the warning? Jesus. Pick a lane, movie. The cameraman takes a long-ass time wandering through the brush on a delightfully sunny morning while someone dramatically bangs on the piano. Finally, Uncle Jed shows up just a-hunting for some food. Oh, wait, it's just some cigar-smoking douchebag with an Elmer Fudd fetish. He approaches a Winnebago and calls out for Randy.
Hubba hubba boy, let's get with it!
Was that ever used as a phrase to get your ass in gear? Randy finally shows up and holy shit, did anyone expect he was yelling at a middle-aged ex-porn star? I was expecting a teenager. Randy drinks from the stream and says it tastes funny, then goes on his liberal trip about industrial waste. Dad then finds books in his son's bag. Randy complains that the two are always at each other's throats and wonders why it's gotta be that way. Dad goes on about being a man, but Randy says it doesn't take killing an animal to be a man. Suddenly, Dad takes a really shitty shot from behind Randy and laughs it off. Come on, Randy, you're 37 now. Stand up for yourself. Randy empties his shotgun and sits down by the stream. Again, Dad aims his gun at his son and then gets attacked by fleshy frisbees covered in pubic hair. Suddenly, Randy's enough of a man when Daddy needs help, but the gun-hating Democrat forgot he unloaded his weapon and gets attacked himself. Jump to a couple of cuties getting loaded up to head up to the lake. This is Sandy and Beth. They're meeting up with...
This is money in the bank.
Yeah! Down, 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 down!
What are you doing?
CSI Miami. Caruso?
Just get your scraper, Darren.
Tom and Greg. Tom and Beth are already an item, and Sandy and Greg are just going to be awkward for the long drive up to the middle of nowhere. Eventually, they stop for gas at a station covered in spiderwebs and animal trophies. Suddenly, Joe comes out from the back. They pay for some gas, and Joe warns them they should stay away from the lake because it's hunting season and there have been more than a couple of accidents. Tom asks Joe if he shot all the animals, and he says he did. Sandy asks why, and then does the jag-off move of dragging a stranger into a debate. People, just pay for your fucking gas and leave the old man alone. Maybe you get off in ambushing strangers into a debate you've already rehearsed 1,000 times and have preloaded to launch against someone who wasn't invited to the debate, but most of us just see you as an asshole chicken shit in desperate need for your social awareness points. Joe says it's good sport if you follow the rules. Sandy says she doesn't think she could kill an animal. Then Joe says he only hunts for food. And I definitely agree with that philosophy. However, I'm guessing he doesn't have too much cougar sausage in the freezer. The gang begins to leave, but Joe again warns them to not go down to the lake because of hunters. Are you fuckers really gonna make Jack Palance beg? They finally agree and leave. Back up at the stream, we hear scouts singing about how many bottles of beer they have left, while the leader sings hymns. Back when they weren't even trying to hide the fact that the scouts were a recruitment tool for the church. The leader calls his troops to fall in and have a chat about leading them into the wilderness and gives them a lesson about the Native American tribes that used to live in the area before being convinced to live elsewhere. He pulls out his compass, which goes all haywire and kind of derails his speech. He assigns the scouts to find a nice rock or stick to bring home to their parents. The leader then goes off on his own and finds the previous Winnebago. He calls out to see if anyone is home, but no one answers. He hears a strange noise from behind and goes to check it out. Stopping for a smoke, he tries to light up with his flint when he's attacked by the disc creatures. A shadow approaches the kids and they run off in, well, I suppose you could call it terror. We check back in with our teens listening to awful synth music as they approach the lake. Hey, you told Joe you weren't going to go up to the lake. Liars! The gang starts peeling off their clothes and jump in. Tom and Beth start sucking face, so Greg asks Sandy if she wants to go for a walk. And nothing, I mean nothing, gets the ladies more revved up than a crappy Star Wars blanket on the ground. Greg brags up his radio skills, but is getting nothing but static, which he says is weird. The two go back and can't find Tom and Beth, but decide to just set up the picnic. And no picnic is complete without the great taste of Funyuns.
Crunchy like chip, fun like onion.
Not really.
Funyun!
And even though it's only been a handful of seconds, in movie time it's more like an hour, and Greg isn't happy that his friends just took off, so they decide to go searching. Suddenly, Sandy falls into a trap. Jesus, that scared the shit out of me. Now that's how you do a jump scare, ladies and gentlemen. After Greg helps her out, they find a shed and go to check it out. Inside they find the gooey remains of several human victims, including Tom and Beth. Sandy and Greg take off running and eventually make it back to the van. Unfortunately, they can't find the keys, leaving plenty of time for the disc alien sucker thingies to attack. And that's when we get a good look at them on the other side of the windshield. The side door handle starts turning, but before whatever's doing it can get in, Greg finds the keys and the van that's been running fine the whole trip won't start up right away. They make it the whole way with one of the sucker things on the windshield, but knock it loose with the windshield wipers. Nah, don't save it for when you get back to civilization. Get rid of your only physical evidence you have proving aliens exist. The two finally make it to a bar, and Greg tells Sandy to stay in the van and lock the door.
I need some help. My friends are dead. Please, lady, call the police.
Now calm down, son. Calm down. You gotta tell us a little more before we call in the sheriff.
You city folk must think we're just made of dimes, son. We need a real good reason if we're gonna wake the sheriff. He just ate himself a whole mess of Aunt Bee's cherry cobbler and done took himself a nap. We go wake him up without a good reason, he gonna be awful ornery and might shoot 1 or 19 of us. Oh, hee-haw, 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 hee-haw. Outside, a shadow passes across the van and Sandy takes off into the woods. Nah, don't run into the fucking bar full of drunk, armed rednecks. Run out into the dark to be alone. Fortunately, maybe, she runs into Joe. Greg describes what he saw to the rednecks and they call over the local conspiracy theorist, Sarge. Seems like he's the only one who believes Greg's stories, and he reminds everyone that he warned them this day was coming. Greg goes out to get Sandy to corroborate his story, but they can't find her. Sarge tells Greg to not go off at night, as that's when they have the edge. Suddenly, he flashes back to the war and starts barking orders and insisting he's the one in charge. And now I want to time travel back to when this movie launched to pitch a lighthearted sitcom, Sarge in Charge. Back inside, Sarge starts in on his tired old stories everyone's sick of hearing, and then he pulls out his gun. The bartender finally agrees to call the police, but takes her sweet fucking time getting to it. She tells everyone it'll be a while because he's busy rounding up some loose Cub Scouts. Okay, well, I guess I appreciate the movie actually giving us a legitimate reason for the cops being unavailable. Most of the time, we don't get a reason. They just don't show up. Or if they do show up, they're usually inept and useless. So, thank you, movie. Just then, Joe comes in carrying an unconscious Sandy. He takes a seat at the bar while Sandy describes the alien creature and the shack where it stores the bodies. Suddenly, the power goes out and the bartender lights some lamps. Sarge insists the outage is due to the alien, but everyone else says it's just the power company. Joe asks if Sandy could find the shack a second time, but she doesn't think she can. Finally, he's had enough of Sarge and tells him to sit down and shut up. The door opens and Sarge fires his gun, dropping the sheriff. He apologizes for it, but then blames Greg because none of this started before he showed up. Joe finally clocks Sarge and takes his gun, shutting him up, then leaves with Sandy and Greg. Outside, he finds one of the alien sucker discs and cuts it with his knife. He then insists the two take him to the shack so they have proof to back up what they say is happening. Back at the bar, the ambulance takes the sheriff away and Sarge slips completely into military nutbag mode. Joe stops off at the station and just happens to have a handy jar of formaldehyde to put the alien sucker disc into. Wait a minute.
You've had that in your trousers all day?
Okay. I know it was in his coat pocket, but I really wanted to use that clip. Back on the road, he shows off the giant scar on his forearm, saying he's run into the aliens before. Sandy asks why he never told anyone, and he reminds them of how people treat Sarge. Greg recognizes some of the trees and insists the shack is just on the other side. Joe stops the truck and they get out to look. Joe takes a closer look at the shed, and the bodies are getting gooier by the minute. Sandy asks if they can leave now, but Joe says they have the alien right where they want him. It's going to eventually come back for its food, and Joe's going to wait for that to happen. Just then, a sucker disc hits Joe in the leg, dropping him to the ground. He tells the others to get out of there and then hobbles to his truck. Greg and Sandy narrowly avoid being hit by a few suckers as they run off. Joe slices the sucker attached to his leg while it makes cartoony sound effects. Lollipop, lollipop, oh lolly, 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 lollipop. Bum. Greg and Sandy make it to the highway and try to flag down passing cars. A police cruiser stops for them and they climb inside. Unfortunately, it's being driven by Sarge, whose butter has completely slipped off of his toast, if you catch my drift. Joe returns to his station and brings out a box of explosive equipment to take back to the shack. The two beg Sarge to go back out to the woods to help Joe, but he's convinced they've been taken over by aliens themselves. He stops the cruiser, orders them to get out, and demands that they tell him the alien plans. Greg tries to reason with him, but Sarge won't listen. Finally, Greg just says, fuck it, and makes up the bullshit story old Fair and Balanced wants to hear.
The FBI came after me and took my phone. They surrounded me at a Hardee's and took my phone that I run all my business, everything with. They could have just, what we've done is weaponize the FBI. It's disgusting.
Once Sarge is lulled by the details, Greg charges him, knocking him down long enough to get away. Sarge gets back in the cruiser and tries running the two down, but they jump over the side of the bridge and into the river below. Back on shore, the two find an empty cabin and just invite themselves inside to a cat jump scare. They find a closet and change into dry clothes. Sandy finds a music box that reminds her of the one Beth gave her as a kid and begins to sob over her lost friend. Greg helps her to the bed, wraps her in a blanket, and says he'll stand guard while she rests. While Greg tries to make some coffee, Sandy cries out for him, and we see a shadow from someone or something outside. The two hear a noise and see the door is standing open. So, naturally, they have to check it out, calling out to whomever might be listening. Greg closes the door and can't remember if he turned the faucet off earlier or not. He then asks Sandy if he turned off the closet light and, for fuck's sake, stop with the fake out bullshit and fucking do something! You're an alien movie, for crying out loud! Fucking act like it! Greg puts Sandy to bed and goes back to the den to drink his coffee. Sandy wakes up to the sound of a wolf howling in the distance, and she finds Greg with a sucker attached to his face. She screams and notices something else in the room. A giant cliché, bald, bulb-headed alien in a satin shawl. Sandy takes off at a very slow pace, but doubles back to hide inside the lower floor of the cabin. The alien isn't fooled and immediately breaks a window trying to get to her. She runs deeper inside and locks the door behind her, trying to escape through the window on the other side. The glass smashes inwards. Oh, it's Joe, and he's got some firepower with him. Sandy wants to get away, but Joe is heading back to the shack, convinced it's the only chance he's got. He tells Sandy that Sarge was wrong. It's not an invasion. The alien is hunting. But Joe has the advantage because the alien doesn't know he's hunting too. Back at the shack, Joe shows Sandy that he's rigged it up with enough dynamite to blow the alien off the planet. Unfortunately, Sarge shows up to get in the fucking way. He's convinced Joe is also an alien and cannot be convinced otherwise. Joe charges Sarge and tries to wrestle the gun away from him, but before Sandy can assist, they all pause when they notice the alien standing in the distance. Sarge slowly approaches with his gun trained on him, muttering and stammering the whole way over. Joe's waiting for the alien to get a little closer to the shack before detonating the dynamite. Suddenly, the alien attacks Sarge. Oh, come on! You mean the alien just throws the suckers by hand? At least make them fire out of a hole in his abdomen or a gun or fucking anything other than throwing them by hand. So this whole time our villain is just a douchebag intergalactic hipster whose life is all about Star Trek and froth? Jesus Christ, thanks for fucking nothing, movie! Sarge falls to the ground and Joe shoots the alien, who starts leaking Mountain Dew live wire but doesn't seem fazed at all. It throws a sucker that hits Joe in the shoulder. He carves it off and actually throws it back. Joe gets hit with another sucker and tells Sandy to detonate the explosives when he gets the alien into the shack. And then we get the best scene in the entire movie. Sandy pushes the plunger and absolutely nothing. She looks down and the wires aren't even fucking attached, for Christ's sake. She rewires the explosives and kaboom! Everything burns and we get one last short rant from Sarge as we stare up into the night sky. The end. Whew, boy, what a turd. Instead of without warning, they should have called it without content. Because this movie isn't bare bones. It's the thin strip of bone marrow lying in the fucking dust that even the buzzards won't touch. Normally I'm okay with the creature not being shown too early, but in this instance it would have been nice to have seen at some point before the last 13 minutes. However, some eagle-eyed viewers might actually have seen a glimpse of the thing about 16 minutes in. This one was directed by Graydon Clark, and it's actually the second of his movies that I've covered. The first one was Joysticks back in year 1. He also directed The Return, Final Justice, and Uninvited. Jack Palance took top billing in this one and had one heck of a career, accruing 127 acting credits over a 55-year career, including Dracula, Gore, Young Guns, Batman, Tango and Cash, and City Slickers 1 and 2. Martin Landau also had a great career, gaining 178 acting credits himself. 2 episodes of The Outer Limits and The Twilight Zone, 76 episodes of Mission Impossible, Ed Wood, Ready to Rumble, and The Majestic, just to name a few. Unfortunately, the only thing these two did for the movie was take a giant bite out of the budget. Apparently it had a $150,000 budget, but the paychecks for Palance and Landau took up half of that. Do I believe their performances warranted 50% of the movie's budget? Not in the slightest. It just makes me wonder what would have happened if the studio decided to go with lesser stars and gave more money to the effects department. Just another one of those what-if scenarios the horror genre is packed to the rafters with. Christopher S. Nelson played Greg, but without warning was mostly towards the end of his acting career. He saw a little bit of exposure in 70s TV. One of his more recent gigs was working stunts on RoboCop 3. The scout leader was played by Larry Storch, who was kind of a staple in TV shows in the 60s and 70s. Car 54, Where Are You? F Troop, Gomer Pyle, USMC, The Batman Superman Hour, voicing the Joker, Groovy Ghoulies, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Brady Kids, Love American Style, and The Ghostbusters. You know, the one with the gorilla. Tom was played by David Caruso in one of his earliest screen credits. Most people know him from CSI Miami, but he was also in An Officer and a Gentleman, First Blood, Twins, and Hudson Hawk. And then there's the alien played by Kevin Peter Hall, and that name might not ring a lot of bells unless you're a big-time Creature Feature fan, because Kevin's most famous roles are the ones where you'd never recognize him because he's in a big damn monster suit. He played the main attraction in Prophecy, Monster in the Closet, Harry and the Hendersons, Predator, and Predator 2. And I suppose that's enough of me gushing over the cast, so let me wrap this episode up nice and neat and bid you all a fond see you next time as we look forward to the next miserable, mildewy movie. So until I greet you then, this is your horrid host, Sugar Pants. See you in your dreams.
Alka-Seltzer neutralizes all the acid your stomach has churned out. For your upset stomach and headache, take Alka-Seltzer and feel better fast.